issues where I believe that more discussion and more analysis is required is the idea of a universal basic income scheme. The Economic Survey spent a whole chapter on the universal basic income scheme, which the CEA pegs as an alternative to what he sees as the plethora of state subsidies for poverty alleviation. He has acknowledged that a lot more analysis will be needed on the implications, but the fiscal cost, 4 to 5% of GDP, that's according to the Economic Survey. Is the universal basic income scheme an idea whose time has come, you believe?
I think when you say universal, it has to be universal. But even actually in the 4.4 to 5% figure, 4 to 5% of the GDP as being the cost of such a scheme, this survey actually does not make it universal. It says leave out the top 25%, so it's not universal. I would go further actually, you know, if you're going to pursue that line of cash transfers, I would go further down and you know, target the poor. We certainly today with the socio-economic caste census, we are able to identify the poor with reasonable degree of confidence, and I think we should use that information. But in any case, you see, the real issue here is that if we were starting with a clean slate, then I think we could do cash transfers. We are not. I think, you know, we have NREGA in place, we've got PDS in place, we've got other subsidies in place.
So do you believe the political climate, given that, you know, we're in a sense coming off the impact of demonetization, the political climate also is not conducive for the government to even suggest taking away some existing schemes and possibly even piloting a universal basic income scheme, which I understand in you know, Madhya Pradesh perhaps is being done in some form or fashion.
Yeah, no, that was a pilot that had been run privately, actually, not by the government. And very small amounts. They talked about, I think, some 200 rupees per month or so. So it's not very large sum. So no, I think our problem is a different one, which is that we are not starting with a clean slate. So the only way, in my judgment, you know, only way politically you can make it feasible, you can make it acceptable, is if you give an option to the beneficiary that, look, you know, you can either take PDS and NREGA, or you can take an equivalent to cash. So really we are talking PDS more than, because NREGA is a
so is it too exploratory at this point in time?
No, some pilots have been run. Actually, I have myself been involved in, because this was an idea which originated actually from Renana Jhabwala, which I really liked. This was a few years ago, that, look, you know, gives the beneficiary the option. So I like that idea.
But the cost implications of 4 to 5% of GDP?
So I'm telling you. No. So the pilot that I got run, for example, in Rajasthan, so the Chief Minister of Rajasthan was keen. She wanted to experiment with this. So in a couple of districts this was run. So what we did was to give an option to the beneficiaries. Very interestingly, you see, it turns out that wherever you find the ATMs, beneficiaries go for cash. But where there are no ATMs, beneficiaries choose to stay with the PDS. And in this case, it turned out only 35%, at least in the first round, only 35% actually agreed to, chose to go for the cash transfers. So still, you know, 65% chose to stay with. So you see, politically, that is the way we will have to proceed if we are to move to cash transfers. But that also requires actually a lot more progress in Aadhaar seeding the bank accounts, and also Aadhaar seeding all the other social programs, so that you can ensure that there is no double dipping happening, right? You know, today, given how far we are in that process of seeding with Aadhaar, it's not possible for to verify for everyone that he or she is not benefiting from both. You know, you do cash and in-kind transfers, both can be taken, and it's not fully verifiable today.
So in your assessment, we're unlikely to see this being taken forward in any meaningful fashion in the budget?
In the budget, I would be
surprised.
Rather surprised.
Okay. Let me then ask you about another idea that you have spoken about, and that's the apparel and leather industry, which the CA also says will be a key to generating formal and productive jobs. He's recommended reforms in labor and tax policies to make apparel and the leather sector globally competitive. Going beyond these two sectors, there's also a fair amount of space that the CA has dedicated in the survey to talk about enhancing manufacturing competitiveness, which also pertains to the exchange rate, etc. what would you say is the absolute priority when we talk about enhancing competitiveness at this point in time?
You mean in terms of policies?
Yes.
Yeah, no, there's a whole lot of things. I mean, I've been writing about this, and I've actually, the economic survey seems to pick up almost everything that I have written out, except one idea, which really to me is the unifying idea for all these other ideas.
The special employment zones.
Which is the coastal employment zones, because you've got to use that instrumentality to bring in. You see, one of the things I've been saying is that, look, our own entrepreneurs seem not to get on a very large scale into products like the apparel, footwear, and even actually in a lot of the electronic products.
Right.
We have a lot of manufacturers now doing it actually, and many new entrants have come in, but the scale still remains relatively small. And unless we get to the Chinese kind of scale, we are not going to get the kind of decline in the cost of production that is required to become competitive. So to me, actually, in the end, it's extremely important that we bring in here, we create conditions conducive to the migration of some of the largest manufacturers of these products to India. And that is where I've sort of then talked about the coastal employment zones, which is the instrument to.
So you're still hoping that this will be taken forward in the budget tomorrow. But specifically, in terms of what the government can do immediately to enhance competitiveness in the context of what we're seeing now happen specifically in the US with President Trump signing executive orders virtually every day, what should the response be?
No, I mean, for our, I personally still think that there's a lot we can do domestically to enhance our own competitiveness. So a lot of the regulations that are in the way, we need to take those out. There's a lot one can do on trade policy. We can go, I mean, I've advocated that this tariff...
Need for faster FTAs, you think?
Faster FTAs, the economic survey talks about it, so certainly we can go that way. Also, I have argued that to solve this problem of tariff inversion, just unify all tariff rates at 7%. And then, of course, you have to work a great deal on what I call trade, or everybody calls trade facilitation. That, for people, for exporters to get clearances, it shouldn't take more than 24 hours. All clearances should happen very rapidly. The turnaround time at the ports has to be much lower than it is. Even we are still, it takes 3 to 4 days for the ships to turn around. In places like Hong Kong and Singapore, 7 hours the ships turn around. Electricity, I think both the rate at which you buy electricity plus the reliability of the availability of electricity, these are all fundamental inputs which for industries like apparel are very important. So there are a lot of improvements we can make along these dimensions, which should go a long way towards making these sectors competitive.
Just to go back to the point that we were making on fiscal consolidation, the survey also says that fiscal activism that's being embraced by advanced economies is not relevant for India. In the context of the fact that you've still got a broken private sector balance sheet problem, you've still got a problem where private investment is not picking up, it's still being led by government spending. Realistically, what can the government do, and what should the expectation be from the budget?
I would still say that we need to work more in correcting the balance between capital and revenue expenditures, so the share of capital expenditures may be raised, and that would of course mean investments in infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, etc. So that is where I would work, and I agree with you that the private, and then of course we talked about the banks. So we should also begin to work. This is a long-drawn process. Cleaning up of the NPAs is going to be a long-drawn process. But that once, if we begin with the cleaning of the NPAs, and simultaneously also then move towards recapitalization, then we can unlock the credit markets to some degree.
But just on the issue of cleaning up the NPAs, do you believe that the atmosphere has gotten vitiated even further with what is happening in, for instance, the Kingfisher IDBI case and so on and so forth, with bankers now being not just interrogated but also being arrested? The will of bankers to even consider the possibility of taking a haircut if need be to get something going as far as a stressed asset is concerned.
No, but this is where I think some sort of assurance from the government side would be useful. And if one can also do a figure away, which can be done to do these things transparently, so that nobody is held responsible for taking the haircuts. It's a doable thing. I don't really think, I mean, the Kingfisher issue was always there lurking in the background, so I don't think that either adds or subtracts from the atmosphere. I still think that, you know, it is something we have to discuss. It is, you know, whether or not in the end we go that way will depend on a lot of factors. But it's something we need to discuss.
Let me end then by asking you about the roadmap for strategic divestments, because the CEA does talk about the need to look at privatization. He talks about some sectors in specific, civil aviation, banking and the fertilizer sector. The NITI Aayog has put together that list for strategic divestments. We don't know whether it will be a more aggressive target that the government will set forward tomorrow in the budget on that, under that head, but what would your expectation be?
Well, well, first, you know, I think since we have talked about this several times on this show, this is my moment of embarrassment, you know, that I've been saying that something will happen this year, but now I'm beginning to get a little less optimistic.
Little less optimistic?
Well, for this year.
Okay.
That, you know, I mean, I've been saying that we'll see some strategic sales happening in 16-17. And now we are almost getting to closer to the end of 16-17, so I have to, but no, 17-18 you will see, because the process is already underway. Okay. So now some progress actually has happened in the DIPAM also, the Department of Investment and Public Asset Management. There is some progress towards sales of the enterprises, and the Secretary DIPAM has been talking about it. And they are looking for, you know, who would conduct the sales, etc. Okay. So only pessimism is that, you know, in 16-17, which I had hoped it would happen,
has not happened, and it will pick up pace, you hope.
But no, 17-18, absolutely. I think, you know, you'll probably see it happen relatively early in 17-18.
Relatively early in 17-18. Let me then end by asking you, what's the one idea that you believe the budget must absolutely have?
Well, you know my answer to that. You know?
No comments.
No. I'm saying coastal employment zones.
Coastal employment zones. All right. I will be watching out for coastal employment zones in the budget speech tomorrow, and we look forward to welcoming you back on CNBC TV 18 as the Finance Minister finally unveils his budget. Thank you very much, as always, Mr. Panagariya, for joining us on CNBC TV 18. With that, it is time for us to wrap up our analysis of the economic survey. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. Our comprehensive coverage on the economic survey and the budget will continue.